And we're back. It's only been like 20 minutes for me, but it's been a day for you. Assuming you're watching these right as they come out. Because obviously you are. I mean, what else would you be doing with your life? We're going to be reading from the same chapter, Why Be a Common Sense Realist, by Devitt. Previously, we read the introduction and about Cartesian skepticism. Since last recording, I read the 5.3, which was Ideas and Sense Data. Basically, why we take the fact that ideas and sense data exist. Then 5.4, Foundationalism and Realism, which is like starting from a skeptic knowledge of nothing, finding something to build a foundation for knowledge on, and leading to realism. Then 5.5, Foundationalism and Anti-Realism, which is... I really hope that wasn't loud. I already restarted the video last time I did that. 5.5, Foundationalism, Anti-Realism. Same thing, starting from foundationalism, but leading to anti-realism, where we don't know of any reality-bound sense data. Then 5.6 is about Kant, which is everything is a thing in itself, and then we impose perceptions external to our own body upon those objects. So the thing in itself always exists. The appearance that we see is imposed upon all objects as soon as we have the capacity for knowing. Now we're in 5.7, the argument for common sense realism. Oh, also, I wanted to ask if you guys prefer just reading, or if I were to do like summaries of the readings I do with my, just kind of reading my commentary, notes on the readings. I'm cool with either. It's easier to read, I suppose, but if you would enjoy one over the other, and you feel like commenting, then feel free to. Otherwise, I'm just gonna do whatever. The argument for common sense realism starts from folk theory and scientific theory. These theories posit many observable physical entities. By and large, we are confident of these posits. Nevertheless, we are cautious, allowing for error. We commit ourselves to most of these entities. Our folk theory, including some folk epistemology, gives us a view of those entities. They exist objectively and independently of the mental. That is how we arrive at our realism. Suppose we are asked to defend this doctrine. We point out the arguments against it and for anti-realist alternatives fail. There is no plausible and worked out alternative to realism. In a sense, realism is the only theory in town. Can we do any better than this, giving a positive argument for realism? Why are these posits necessary? Donald Williams believes that realism can be established inductively, as the passage that opened this chapter indicates. He thinks it is confirmed day to day in innumerable ways. I agree. However, as Pointman points out, the induction question is very unusual. The induction is supposed to be an explanatory one, an inference to the best explanation. Yet it is hard to see what it is that realism explains. More strictly, what is it that the theories on which realism is cautiously based explain? The difficulty is that the very language in which we normally describe the basic phenomena is a thing language. It near enough presupposes realism. We seem not to have a language that is neutral between realism and some alternative theory in which to describe the phenomena. This reflects the fact that there has never been a viable alternative theory. Intuitively, what we want is a language to describe the facts of experience as experience, for if realism is to explain anything, it must be these facts. Wow, reading goes slow. And we do not have such a language, but it is straightforwardly parasitic on the thing language. It is the earlier mentioned as-if language. The invented adverbial language mentioned in section 5.3 would also do the trick. It is just as parasitic on the thing language. Consider a simple situation where a realist would assert the existence of a common sense object. 1. There's a black raven on the lawn. He would also be prepared to assert the more cautious statement. It is as if there is a black raven on the lawn. 2 is more cautious because, unlike 1, it does not posit the existence of a black raven or long. Anyone, apart from a thoroughgoing skeptic, should be prepared to assert such as if statements in appropriate circumstances, even if he thought he were a brain in a vat simulated by a super scientist. It is because of the truth of such statements that people have been tempted to posit sense data. However, 2 does not posit sense data, nor indeed any entity at all. We now raise the question, what is the explanation of 2? Why does the world seem the way it does? The obvious answer is that the world seems that way because it is that way. It is as if there is a black raven because there is a black raven. The answer has a trivial air to it, but it is nonetheless good. The trivial air arises, first, because we have no way to describe the explanans except in parasitic as-if terms. Second, because we do not normally feel any need to explain why it is as if there are x's unless we are seriously contemplating some answer other than the obvious one that there are x's. We are not seriously contemplating such an answer because there is none with any more plausibility than brain in the vat fantasies. Fantasies is a strange word to use there. Would you want? I mean, I suppose that. Would you care if you were a brain in the vat? Doesn't really make a difference to us. Anyways, however, if an explanation is insisted on, the realist one is a good one. And if we actually had an independent, non-parasitic, experiential language, which we could, in principle, have, the area of triviality would disappear. Realism is indeed confirmed day to day in innumerable ways. It is conferred by almost every as-if statement we are inclined to assent to. This bears on the discussion of success in section 7.2. The underlying truth of representative realism, is that we can infer realism from more epistemically basic statements. These statements are not about our sense data, but they are, in a way, to be brought out further in section 6.7, close to our experience. This is not to say that we do, as a matter of fact, infer the existence of the external world from the way things seem. It seems almost certain that our basic non-inferential beliefs are ones about the external world. We take realism for granted. Nevertheless, such beliefs, like any others, can be questioned. If they are, they can be justified, though not to skeptical standards. 5.8. Naturalized epistemology. The thoroughgoing skeptic. Such the standards of knowledge, or rational belief, too high for them to ever be achieved. Our best science shows this. It shows us, for example, that if knowledge is to be gathered, we must eliminate implausible hypotheses without being able, ultimately, to justify that elimination. Ooh. It shows us there is always an empirical possibility of error with any normal knowledge claim. Standards that our best science shows cannot be met short of instantaneous solipsism. A doctrine that is literally incredible should be ignored. Skepticism is simply uninteresting. It throws the baby out with the bathwater. Though this form of skepticism is uninteresting, an example of Harcher-Field brings out something like it might not always have to be so. Suppose a person has the following theory. His life is humdrum except for his job. He works as a laboratory assistant for a super scientist who has 19 brains and vats. Super scientist simulates each of these brains to believe that it has a humdrum life except for its job. It believes that it is a laboratory assistant for super scientists who has 19 brains and vats, each one being simulated to believe. In these circumstances, a skeptical hypothesis is certainly interesting. Having dismissed the quest for certainty, the rock-hard foundations, and for ultimate justification, what then remains for epistemology? It is left with the task of explaining our coming to know science and common sense. There are two parts to this explanation, a descriptive part and a normative part. The descriptive part explains how, as a matter of fact, we form our opinions. The normative part explains what makes these opinions knowledge, insofar as they are. We seek a scientific explanation of our knowing science. The epistemic relation between humans and the world itself becomes the object of scientific study. Epistemology becomes naturalized. Naturalized epistemology takes science, and hence its posits, pretty much for granted. An obvious starting assumption is the earlier mentioned one, that these posits exist objectively and independently of the mental. So it approaches epistemology from a realist standpoint. It is in accord with Maxime 3. However, naturalism does not prevent a reconsideration of realism. I shall make one in the next section. In the next chapter, I shall consider our entitlement to such notions as belief and truth. Here I shall simply use them, even if we are not entitled to them. Even if we are not entitled to them, we do not at present have any convenient way of dispensing with them in doing epistemology. We are born into the world with dispositions to respond selectively to the experiences caused by stimuli at our surfaces. We have innate similarity standards. Furthermore, we are innately disposed to infer in certain ways. The world bombards us with stimuli. The innate machinery is activated, ordering the resulting experience. We are theorizing. We presume that even these first steps take us beyond experience, positing an external world, however primitive. In these first steps, we arrive at beliefs, partly, as a result of experience. We do not, however, infer them from experience, representative realism. For inference, being a relation between beliefs, that would require that our first beliefs were about experience, which is contrary to the presumption and highly implausible. After a few years of this process, during which we have gained a language, we find ourselves the possessors of a complex and sweeping theory, positing the existence of tables, trees, cats, and so forth. We have come up with folk theory of the external world. At this point, we are way beyond experience. 1. We believe singular statements about observed physical objects. 2. Further, we believe singular statements about unobserved but observable physical objects. 3. Further still, we believe general statements covering many unobserved but observable physical objects. We do not stop at this point. Folk theory grows into science as it goes self-critical and systematic. This move may seem even more daring. We talk of such entities as electrons, muons, and curved spacetime. We generalize about entities that are not simply unobserved but unobservable. The first task of naturalized epistemology is to discover the nature of this belief-forming process. What methods of inference do we employ? Presumably, they include simple induction at least, but they will certainly include others. In my view, they will include inference to the best explanation. What is the precise nature of these methods when one is employed by another? In what circumstances do we abandon a theory? It is well known that questions like these are not easy to answer. For example, we have learned from Duhem and Quine, that our theory of the world, better set of theories, is tested against experience as a whole. There are many ways we react in the face of recalcitrant experience, apart from abandoning the particular theory that may seem threatened by that experience. We can adjust our theory of the instruments involved, or an auxiliary theory, or a low-level statement of conditions. We can decide not to accept the observation statement which the experience tempts us to make. Perhaps we are hallucinating. We can accept the problematic observation statement and hope that the future will bring a means of accommodating it, as Newtonians did with their observations of the perihelion of Mercury. The first task of naturalized epistemology is a psychological task, which is not to say that it should be done only in psychology departments. It is simply descriptive of how people do infer and form beliefs. This leaves untouched the question of how they should infer and form beliefs. Some belief forming procedures may be good, others bad. We have good reason, a priori, to suspect that some belief forming procedures humans actually use will be bad. The empirical evidence that some are bad is impressive. People are sometimes irrational. Some procedures we use will be better than others. And it may be that there are procedures which we don't use, which are better than those we do. The task of finding good rules of inference is not psychological. In tackling it, naturalized epistemology becomes normative. A good procedure is one we ought to follow. This normative part of the task seems to be a departure from Quine. I'm never going to say that right, probably. Who thinks that all epistemology is psychology? A good belief forming procedure leads to justified beliefs. Goodness consists roughly in tending to lead to truth, in being reliable. Relative goodness is partly indeterminate. As Harterfield has helped to bring home to me, there are at least three considerations to balance off against each other. Power, degree of probability, and degree of truth. Power is important because we want procedures that yield significant truths. Truths with a lot of content. Degree of probability is important because we want procedures that give high probability to conclusion. Degree of truth is important because we want procedures that yield conclusions with a high degree of truth. Balancing these considerations is difficult. For example, how do we compare a procedure according to which it is 0.5 probable that a proposition with a lot of content is 0.5 true, with one according to which it is 0.7 probable that a proposition with much less content is 0.7 true? Despite this indeterminacy, I see no reason to doubt that most questions in the goodness of procedures are concerned with objective matters of fact. Alright, the video's running on, so I am going to end it there. Thank you for coming back again. Much appreciated. Have a good sleep. Keep on thinking. Bye-bye.